Now, my favourite sport, and I go completely like I turn into a little kid every time I'm around it. I get very excited, and it's like Christmas is here again. The grand final is on, and we get a grand final every 3 weeks. Such is my excitement about Supercars. They start this weekend under one hell of a big cloud after what's happened with Holden, and we've shed plenty of blokey tears about that on this program. Sean Seamer is the boss of Supercars, and he joins us now from Adelaide ahead of the Superloop 500, which is kicking off this weekend. How are you, mate? Nice to see you on the telly.
I'm very good, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Now, Sean, I've got to ask, when did you know about the Holden thing? When did they tell you? Because it's kind of a big deal for the red v blue sport that we've come to know and love.
Yeah, well, we were fortunate enough to find out at the same time that the dealers found out earlier this week, which obviously wasn't a lot of time, but it was good to be informed as soon as their key partners were.
So how does this work technically? Because a lot of people automatically turn around and say, well, no Holden equals, well, that's half of the team's gone. Of course, the truth about this sport is, yes, Holden has money, design, the badges, all the rest, but obviously you can't buy these cars. So there's a whole series of things that basically mean that, look, it's still a big blow, but the sport rolls on and you would expect to have just as many teams next year and many years into the future, right?
That's exactly it, Paul. Obviously, those familiar with the sport will know that we've been working towards a new set of regulations in 2022, and the news towards the end of last year about Commodore no longer being available in Australia meant that we'd been working towards a future without the Commodore at the end of next year. Now it's down to me and the rest of the team to figure out which of those plans we can bring forward into next year. And yep, you did right. We'll be here putting on a good show for many years to come.
So I've got to ask perhaps a question that I'm sure you're not going to be able to answer at all. But say, let's imagine, there's Chris Kenny Motors, and you know that they've got a sports car out there and they're wanting people to buy it, and, you know, it's competition for the Mustang. How do you convince them to go racing? Because it's an awful lot of money. How do you convince any of the other brands?
My Maseratis are in.
Yeah, good. All right. How do you convince them? Do you have to give them a slice of ownership? Do you have to help pay them to get in? How do you entice a new brand to go racing?
Well, look, I think there's a range of things about the sport that make it very exciting and attractive for manufacturers and brands that want to get involved. And a big part of that is our national presence. The fact that we go everywhere in Australia is something that we're very proud of. We go to New Zealand as well, of course. But our national footprint, the fact that we're on for almost 10 months of the year, it's a very long season. We've got an amazing base of TV ratings. We've done very well with Fox Sports last year, had a great Bathurst. So we've got a very strong platform here, and the costs aren't as bad as you would think. I mean, one of the big parts of Gen 3 and the regulations that we're moving towards is trying to make the sport as accessible as possible for manufacturers to come racing, to benefit from the broader family and an amazing and passionate fan base.
Now, this particular season, obviously a lot of emotion around Holden, but also your job as the bloke in charge is that basically you've got to balance all of what are some very passionate, very big brain, very fiery people. And last year it felt at times that it got a little bit out of hand. There'll be a lot of emotion connected to this year. How do you make sure that people stay competitive but don't get too narky in all of this?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, you know, talking about last year, Paul, and you and I have spoken about this as well, I think what was unfortunate for us as a sport is the narrative around supercars became very, very technical. We found ourselves having to explain things about aerodynamics and downforce, and really what we want the sport to be is something that everybody can enjoy, both older, younger generations, people that are technically minded, but those that just like a good show. So the focus for us going into this year's very much about putting the drivers back in the forefront, the teams back at the forefront of the sport, because that's where people have their emotional attachment. And a good season for us is a season where we can focus on those stars and put them up front and centre again.
Well, Sean, I've got to say, this is the most open sport in the country. The idea that, and you know, I'm not talking about corporates and TV people and all the rest of it, right? It is the only sport in Australia where you can buy a ticket where you can walk right up to the to the dressing room, the garage, and to be able to physically stand and look in, to be able to talk to the people in the coach's box. If you buy your paddock ticket, you can of course do that in Adelaide and everywhere else. It is, if you haven't been physically to an event, you've got to go this year. But I've got to say, well done to you and the team for how open this sport is, even for loudmouths like me who sometimes get out above their skids. But I genuinely appreciate the way that the sport's being run and the openness of it, mate. Good luck for a great season. I'll see you on the weekend.
Thanks, Paul. Look forward to having you down here.
Good man.